The sacred fire still raged behind her, orange tongues licking the darkening sky of Iodia. Yet goddess Sita no longer felt its heat. Her body, which had just stepped out of Lord Agni's embrace without a single blemish, felt cold and hollow, as if her soul remained within the purifying embers. Before her stood Rama, the newly crowned king, the man she loved beyond measure, but also the one who had just asked her to prove her purity. Before thousands of judging eyes, the skies over Lanka may have been cleared of her vanished shadows, but here, in her own land, Sita realized that the shadows of human doubt were darker than any demon. The crowd of Ayodhya stood frozen, their breath held as they saw the goddess standing tall, her hair not even singed, proving to the world that her sanctity was untouched by darkness. Yet, in that suffocating silence, Sita did not see a victory. She saw only a gaping wound in a relationship that was supposed to be the foundation of the universe. Rama gazed at her with eyes wet with tears hidden behind a king's stoicism, a look that begged for forgiveness without the courage to speak it aloud. Sita understood that as a king, Rama was bound by the laws of Dharma and the demands of his subjects, but as a woman, she felt an unparalleled shattering. Her graceful footsteps led her away from the stage of fire, leaving the burning heat for the shadow of a palace that now felt alien and cold. Inside her private chambers, the light of oil lamps danced on the walls, reflecting the shadow of a woman who had conquered the Dandaka forest but lost to human words. She sat on the edge of her bed, her delicate hands touching the silk fabrics that now felt coarse against skin that had grown used to bark and the dust of exile. Her mind drifted back to her time in the Ashoka Grove, beneath the Simsupa tree, where she rejected every temptation of Ravana with the sheer strength of Rama's memory. To her, loyalty was not a burden or an obligation, but the very air she breathed, a commitment that transcended the boundaries of space and time. But now, after the fire had proven everything, she wondered in her heart, why does internal truth require such a painful external validation? In the tradition of Sanatana Dharma, Sita was not just a wife, she was the Shakti of Rama, the creative energy that gave power to truth. Yet now that energy felt drained. The chamber door creaked softly, and without turning, she knew Rama had entered, carrying the scent of sandalwood and the heavy burden of the crown he now wore. No words were spoken for several minutes, only a silence filled with 1,000 questions hanging in the air like dust that refused to settle. Rama approached, but Sita remained still, looking toward the window where a crescent moon hung, reminding her of the cycles of time that never cease. "Sita," Rama whispered, his voice hoarse with suppressed emotion, a voice that was once music to her but now felt like an echo from a distant past. Sita did not answer, she simply closed her eyes, letting the memory of the fire return, a heat that did not burn her skin, but scorched every remnant of innocence she held. She realized that after tonight, Ayodhya would never be the same for her, and the love they shared had lost its golden hue, replaced by the ash of the ordeal. In Vedic philosophy, fire is the pure witness, but for Sita, the fire was the divider between a hopeful past and a future of bitter resilience. Rama tried to explain the duties of a leader, of how a king must be above all suspicion for the sake of the moral stability of his people. Sita listened patiently, for she was the daughter of the earth with infinite patience. But in her heart, she felt a fracture that no logical explanation could heal. She thought of how society would always seek flaws in women, how purity was always a weight placed on their shoulders, while the world allowed men to set the rules. The focus of this moment was not on Rama's doubt, but on Sita's rising realization that her dignity did not depend on the recognition of a king or his subjects. She was a child found in the furrow of the earth, and to the earth she would eventually seek ultimate refuge. When the human world failed to understand her, that night, Sita did not sleep. She spent her time in meditation, seeking a peace that no grand palace or public acclaim could provide. She saw visions of a future where she would return to the forest, raising her sons alone, demonstrating the strength of a mother who is independent and sovereign. For her, the Agni Pariksha was the end of her role as the obedient wife and the beginning of her role as a symbol of female endurance beyond patriarchy. The next day, as she walked through the palace corridors, she saw the servants bowing with a new kind of respect. Yet she felt it as a mixture of fear and guilt. The people who had cheered for proof yesterday were now silent, not daring to meet the eyes of the goddess who now radiated a cold, sharp wisdom. Sita realized that humans often destroy the most sacred things, just to satisfy their shallow curiosity. She held no grudge against the people of Ayodhya, for she understood that they were merely mirrors of eternal human ignorance. However, she also knew she could no longer pretend the wound did not exist, for it had become part of her new identity as the tested Sita. From a Buddhist perspective, the suffering was the path to enlightenment, a detachment from worldly attachments that is often excruciating. Sita began to shed her attachment to the image of the Queen of Ayodhya, and started to embrace her true self as a manifestation of the vast universe. Rama often came to see her, trying to rebuild the bridges that had collapsed. But Sita always greeted him with a polite, but distant kindness. That distance was not born of hate, but because Sita had moved beyond the need for Rama's validation, she had found it in her own fire. She often stood on the palace balcony, looking toward the distant forest, longing for the simplicity of life among trees and wild creatures. In the forest, there were no sharp tongues, no unjust laws, only the honest, raw laws of nature. She thought of Lakshmana, her loyal brother-in-law, whose eyes reflected the same pain every time he saw Sita walking alone in the palace gardens. Lakshmana knew that what happened was a tragedy wrapped in the cloak of Dharma, and he suffered in silence seeing her quiet agony. Sita often comforted Lakshmana, asking him not to blame anyone, for every soul has its own role to play in this cosmic drama. Sita's strength lay in her ability to forgive without forgetting, to keep loving without allowing herself to be trampled upon again. The narrative shift here is toward Sita's internal peak, where she realized the trial of fire was not for Rama, but for her to realize her own true power. She was no longer a mere companion in Rama's journey, she was the center of her own story, a hero bearing the moral weight of the world. Days turned into months, and whispers in the markets of Ayodhya began to surface again, proving that human doubt is a disease with no cure. Sita heard these whispers through the blowing wine tales of a washerman, who still questioned her purity despite the fire's witness. She smiled bitterly, realizing that even God descending to earth could never satisfy the human hunger for shallow drama. When Rama finally made the agonizing decision to send her back to the forest, to maintain the peace of the kingdom, Sita did not cry or beg. She accepted the decision with her head held high, for she knew this palace had long been a prison for her soul since that night of the trial. This second exile was, to her, a liberation and opportunity to return to the embrace of Mother Earth, who always accepts her children unconditionally. Inside the chariot that carried her away, she looked at the spires of Ayodhya one last time, offering a blessing to the city that gave her both joy and deepest sorrow. Lakshmana, who escorted her, wept uncontrollably at the banks of the Ganges, begging for forgiveness for the cruel command he had to execute. Sita placed her hand on Lakshmana's head, blessing him with a mother's affection, and asked him to serve Rama with unwavering loyalty. "Do not grieve, my son," she said with a voice as calm as the river, "for the earth always has a way of protecting those who walk the path of truth." In the forest, at the hermitage of sage Valmiki, Sita began a new chapter, not as a discarded queen, but as a wise and independent woman. She gave birth to Lava and Kusha, and in raising them, she instilled values of courage, honesty, and most importantly, self-dignity. She taught them that true power does not lie in weapons, but in the ability to master oneself and stand firm on one's principles. Lava and Kusha grew into extraordinary warriors, yet behind their strength was the gentle guidance of a woman who had passed through fire and remained whole. For years in the forest, Sita never once spoke a harsh word about Rama to her children. She wanted them to love their father as an ideal of Dharma, even if she herself had felt the bitter side of that rigid application of law. This was the highest form of forgiveness, keeping someone's image clean in the eyes of their children, even when that person had broken one's heart. Meanwhile, in Ayodhya, Rama lived in deep loneliness, performing rituals with a golden statue of Sita by his side, showing that she was irreplaceable. That golden statue was a symbol of Rama's regret, a silent admission that without Sita, his leadership felt hollow and soulless. But to Sita, the golden statue was a dead object. She preferred living in the vibrant forest over being a symbol in a dead palace. The Jain perspective in this context emphasizes ahimsa not just physically, but mentally. By not returning hatred with hatred, Sita practiced an extraordinary spiritual detachment, freeing herself from the desire to be reclaimed by the society that had cast her out. When time finally brought her back to Rama during a great ceremony, the world once again demanded a final proof of her purity. Rama, with tears in his eyes, asked Sita to once again declare her sanctity in public so that he could bring her back to the palace. But this time, Sita did not choose fire. She chose a truth that was more absolute and final. She stood before the crowd, her aura so bright that people had to turn their faces away, unable to gaze at her majesty. "If it is true that I have never thought of any man but Rama in my thoughts, words, and deeds," she spoke with a voice that shook the ground, "then let Mother Earth, from whom I came, open her womb and take me back into her embrace." Instantly, the ground beneath her feet trembled, and a great rift appeared, emitting a soothing golden light. From within the earth emerged a throne carried by sacred serpents, and Mother Earth herself appeared to welcome her daughter, who had finished her task. Sita ascended that throne with a smile of peace that no one in Ayodhya had ever seen before. Rama rushed forward, trying to stop her, begging her not to go, but it was too late. The boundary between the human and the divine had closed. Sita disappeared into the embrace of the earth, leaving behind a crowd that now wept, regretting their own ignorance and cruelty. Sita's departure was not a defeat, but a final declaration of sovereignty that she would not allow herself to be tested again by flawed human standards. She chose to return to her origins, to a place where a soul's value is not measured by public perception but by unshakable truth. This event left a permanent scar on the history of Ayodhya, an eternal reminder that justice delayed is justice denied. In Indian tradition, Sita is considered the ideal woman, but this narrative emphasizes that idealism is not about passive suffering, but quiet strength. She is the symbol of every soul that has been slandered, tested, and cast out, yet remains pure within, unaffected by the darkness around them. Sita's story is a reminder to us all to look beyond the surface, to value internal truth over following the tide of mass opinion. The Agni Pariksha may have been a trial of fire for Sita, but its aftermath was a trial of the heart for all of humanity across time. We are invited to reflect. Where do we stand in this story? Are we part of the judging mass, or do we have the courage of Sita to stand in truth? Sita's power came not from anger, but from a profound understanding of the transient nature of this world. She taught that spiritual independence is the most precious treasure, one that no king or fire can ever take away. Her name is now spoken before Rama Sitaram as a mark of respect that it was the goddess who gave meaning to the god's journey. Without Sita's sacrifice and strength, the Ramayana is merely a story of war. With her, it becomes a story of love, dignity, and transcendence. Let us take the lesson of this trial by fire not as a form of suffering, but as a process of soul purification toward true freedom. In every corner of India, from grand temples to remote villages, Sita's name resonates as a protector of the weak and a giver of strength to the just. Her shadow is still felt in every breeze that sweeps the red earth, reminding us that truth may be buried, but it will never die. Sita has transcended legend. She has become part of our collective consciousness, a lighthouse for anyone struggling in their own fire. Thank you for listening to this profound journey of Goddess Sita, the daughter of the earth who remained undefeated by fire or prejudice. May her courage inspire you to always keep the fire of truth within your heart, no matter what storms rage from the outside world. Don't forget to share your thoughts in the comment section, like this video if it inspired you. Share it with your friends, and subscribe to Storycraft Studio for more incredible mythological tales.